This on. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me in here? Okay. Hello, everyone on the internet. We can't hear you or see the people on the internet, and they aren't going to be able to ask any questions of us either. So if you ask a question, I'm going to repeat it so they can hear it. And unfortunately, I'd love to see who's out there, but that just doesn't work that way. So anyway, I'm Sandy Hollenhorst. This is my husband, Mike Hollenhorst. Our friend Lorraine has sick cats today, so she can't be here. She might be on the internet, though. And so it's just going to be the two of us today. But thanks, everyone, for coming. It's a full house, which is great. Okay. Perfect. Thanks, Jennifer. So today's talk is on the snowy egret, and this is the bird with the golden slippers, we call it, because you'll see that even in this picture, its foot is peeking out of the water here. And this is a program that a new program. We haven't presented it to any students yet. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about our organization first. We started these programs, actually Ann Macias and Dr. Penny Finley started these programs in 2013. The programs were coordinated by Penny. Penny was a professor at FGCU, would bring her College of Education students to Estero Park and would create programs. Ann passed away in March of 2018, and we started the Macias Wildlife Society in her name a month later. So she remains our inspiration today. She was a wonderful photographer. We do have a hard drive that has many of her photos on it, which is where some of the photos you'll see today came from. We also have other members of the society that provide photos for us, and with that we've created new programs. And this is a picture of the kids that we'd bring to Estero Park. It'd be anywhere from 60 to 90 kids. These were sometimes 3 of Penny's classes. We'd give them a presentation in the Estero Park Pavilion, great spot. We'd give them one of these notebooks like this that contain the whole presentation and a flash drive, extra drawings and extra photos that they could use to create their own lesson plan. And then the kids would work in pairs, and then they would go to Treeline Elementary School, and we'd all go on one day. Now, due to COVID, the restrictions, as you can imagine, are much stricter. We used to be able to also roam from room to room because we would observe the students. All those rooms are locked these days, so it makes it much harder to do that. So we are embarking on a new program with FGCU. They have a program called the Service Learning Program, where FGCU partners with local nonprofits or government organizations, and students can sign up to do your programs. Every undergraduate student at FGCU has to get 80 student learning or service learning credits, an hour per credit, to graduate. So they're always looking for things to do. So the idea would be that we would prepare these programs for them. We would line them up either with Lee County School, after-school programs, charter schools. It would be the same thing, except instead of just the College of Education, we may be able to track kids from the water school, science programs, and then they would take our program, turn it into a lesson plan. We'd arrange for them to go out to the schools and observe them. So it would be probably more frequent, but fewer numbers of kids at any one time at a school. Trying to take 60 to 90 kids plus observers to one school in this day and age is a real challenge. So it's great that FGCU has this program. For example, the Mosquito Control District, they did a program on mosquitoes and put together a whole slideshow for the kids, and then some of the kids took that to a school and gave a program on mosquitoes to local elementary students. So what we're doing has been done before, but as far as we know, there aren't any wildlife or bird programs that are offered for these kids to take out to these schools. We did have a 2-hour Zoom meeting in October with the people who run that program at FGCU, and we're going to be going to their fair in January, where we'll have table, and we'll be telling them about what they can do with us in the local community. So we're excited to embark on that new program. And in addition to doing the program, creating a lesson plan, some of these teachers would, student teachers would come up with really, really cute programs for, or projects for these kids. So in addition to presenting them, the kids would have a little project. Leo Daniel here would draw life cycles for us that the kids could color, cut it out, turn it into a puzzle. It was really some creative ideas. And then my favorite, I think, was the roseate spoonbill, where they had to put together a roseate spoonbill and the beak was 2 plastic spoons. So these kids are really creative with what they come up with for the projects. So today we're going to talk about the snowy egret, and Mike's going to do this intro part here.
I am?
Yes. Okay. Go for it, dude. Here's your clicker, too, if you want.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. Well, I got roped into this again. So we see the snowy egret all the time here, and if you haven't seen one, go to the beach and look for a fisherman, because there's always one there. They're a cute little bird. It's very common. However, at one time here, it was almost extinct. It was driven to extinction, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. It has survived thanks to human intervention, as a matter of fact. It has survived and has flourished here and throughout the United States in its range. And so we're going to talk about that, and then a little bit on what you can do, what we can do to make sure that the bird survives. And if I can work this machine, did that do it?
Yep.
How much of this am I doing?
Keep going, I'll let you know.
Okay. It's always good to have a commander around. So it's this is one of the smaller of the all-white birds, and this is the whitest of the white birds. It is actually a beautiful bird. It's generally along the wetlands shoreline, and it has a varied diet. It'll eat almost anything that it comes across, much better than the ibis, and not as big as the blue heron, but it loves its food. As Sandy mentioned, yellow feet, and they use those feet, actually. It's thought that they evolved these bright yellow feet to enhance their food gathering. They use it as a lure, and we've got a couple pictures of that coming up. A charming call. In any event, incidentally, that was recorded on our bird islands here in Bonita Bay, and actually right over there's a sign there that the Macias Wildlife Society put up with a bunch of birds on it, and then right around the corner there is a huge, in season, is a huge nesting of these guys along with some other guys. So that was a squabble that the snowy was having with a blue. So it's got these very distinctive yellow feet, and you can see those when they fly over your house. You can see them on the shoreline. You can see them when they're buzzing a wetland. The other distinguishing feature of this is the dark beak, and that helps particularly as an infant, a new hatchling. You can distinguish this new hatchling from some of the other white birds. So it runs about 24 inches long, and it weighs maybe 13 ounces. So it's not a big bird. It's not a heavy bird. Excuse me, we have just a audio-visual issue. Or something. Am I still doing this one too? Huh. So, you know, about a yard wingspan. It's got a beautiful wingspan, and they, as I mentioned, they tend to look whiter than the other white birds. It's a beautiful bird. And they'll forage along with all the other white birds. If you haven't noticed, if you've watched birds at all, here in Florida particularly, white birds like to forage with white birds. Dark birds like to go with dark birds. It's kind of like humans. But we can see, let's see. That looks to me like a snowy egret. Notice the plumes that it has. What? Oh yeah, right up here. Yeah, those are snowies. These are great whites. These are the ones that everybody likes to see, the spoonbill. And then I think this is a tricolor. Yeah. Where is the white ibis? Over here. Yeah. Yeah, one right here, obviously right in front. The one we're missing here from this crowd, this is a Bonita Bay picture too. The one we're missing, of course, is the stork. And you'll see those as well. And they'll hang out in the same crowd. Let's see, I think, did we have a stork on this one? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, this is a salad bowl which the club cleared 2 years ago. When you go toward the high rises, you go over a little bridge, and if you look out from the bridge to the left, going toward the high rises, that is the salad bowl. And now that they've cleared it, it's spectacular. They really get a lot of foraging in there. They get lots of chicks. They get all of the white birds that we've seen there, and usually in big numbers. Right. This wetland was reestablished when we first came here, and for many years it was totally overgrown. You didn't see anything there, just canes and cattails. And to clear it, the club had to pay people to come in and take them out one by one, and they did. And it was not inexpensive. We have one other potential wetland in Bonita Bay that is owned by the Bonita Bay Community Association, and maybe one of these days we'll be able to clear that out. But that's called the Horseshoe, which is down. It's oh, that's right. They did. The club did cleared out the community cleared out that pond, which is now a wetland, between the marina and the backside of Harbor Landing. Yeah, it's a small area, but it's turned out to be a pretty good breeding area. And you can walk over there. You can stand right along the edge of it. It's great. take the water dependent. Oh, the question is, what do they have to do to convert it over? And the general method on these smaller areas is to pull the weeds one at a time. And yeah, they're after, right, as Sandy has reminded me to say, they're after the invasives. And the cattails particularly will overwhelm the area, and they'll do it within a season. Yes?
One other area that I noticed they cleared is by Bayview 1 and 2 on the right-hand side. I've seen quite a few birds back in there.
Yes, it's the comment was at Bayview 1 and 2, it was cleared, and that again was cleared by Bonita Bay Community Association, and it has filled in. Yeah, so it's
open now.
It's filled in with, excuse me, it's filled in with birds. So yeah, it's great. It's great. We need more of that. It's very expensive to do, but the birds need it, and we'll talk about that a little bit. You can see on this, I alluded to this earlier, if you can see that, they're dragging the golden slippers in the water, looking to stir up any sea or waterborne animal, mostly fish, and trying to get them to accumulate a little bit, and then they'll turn around and grab them. And they're very good at it. So you'll see them dip down. This is one of really only 2 birds that I know of, that the other being the reddish egret, that will use their feet to stimulate and lure the fish. Notice on this, you also see the lures. This is a bird that is in, the hormones have kicked in. It's changing into a bright yellow, and so it's time to breed. Whoops, oh, there I did it again.
Is that both males and females, Mike? That turn?
It's primarily males,
Well, it's
but both of them do develop a plume, and both of them do develop brighter colors, which is pretty much true of all our wading birds. They have a seasonal change into brighter colors. And this is salad bowl, yeah.
Size fish I catch.
Paul Gavin has admitted that that's his usual catch. For those of you that don't know, Paul is usually out there illegally fishing on these lakes. But again, this is open water that was available once they cleared out all the invasives, and this is a better picture of what the plume hunters were after, and we'll talk some more about that. Pardon me? Oh, you get it.
He'll be back. He'll be back. He's not done yet. Okay, so as Mike said, we not only see them in our shallow wetlands around Bonita Bay, but they're very common at the beach park. And it's the same thing. They're looking for fish because of all of their activity, fishing, the swimming, the dragging of feet, the wading through chest deep water. They use up a lot of energy, so they're very hungry birds, and they're often eating, and they like to adopt a fisher person. And not only did the snowy egret adopt the fisher person here, these are snowies, but the great egret and the great blue heron. And this day, we talked to this fisher woman, and she said that normally she only has 1 snowy egret with her. And the one she had with her was I think she calls him Mooch. But he was very upset that day because 3 of his buddies showed up for fish too. But this was a fascinating story. She said during Irma, that little snowy egret followed her back to her house. She lived across the road on Little Hickory Island, and spent 3 days in her garage because it was afraid, it was trying to find a place to hide from the storm. And then it went back out and went on its merry way. But it hunkered down for 3 days. She had to feed it all at her minnows. And here they are. I think this is Mooch over here, and these are the buddies he's trying to get rid of. But this is a very good example. This is one of Lorraine's photos of the really, really peak of the breeding season. Those yellow lures actually turn almost a red-pink color. And this you'll see in March and April primarily. The peak of the, what? You can't tell them apart. I mean, it's probably a little brighter on the males, but they're identical birds, really. They really look alike. And this is the peak of the nesting season is usually, we go out and count the nests at the end of April, but they start nesting in March through April into May. Now, the great blue herons are a little different. They kind of tend to nest anytime they feel healthy. So they can nest early. We've seen them nesting in June. But most of these smaller birds like to nest in colonies together for protection. So you see them all kind of going at it at the same time. And this is another, you can see that and see how much darker this is one of Ann Macias's photos. And then its breeding plumage is starting to really show. And here's a typical territory dispute. So now they display when they're trying to attract a female, but they also display when they're trying to protect the area that they've staked out for a nest. And usually the male shows up first, kind of stakes out the area. He'll put a few sticks there, but he's just trying to attract a female. And then there are other birds they also compete with. So this is an anhinga, and you can see the anhinga is also in its breeding plumage. That turquoise eye is a characteristic of the plumage, and you can see the red. These are 2 birds at the peak of the breeding season. Now here are 2, male and female. So I think the male is probably here because he has the stick, and he doesn't place the stick. He only brings the stick to the nest. She decides where the stick is going to go. We kind of call sticks bird jewelry. Sometimes if she doesn't like the stick, she'll just throw it away too. So it's a very interesting ritual that they go through. And usually this stick exchange is sort of, if she accepts the stick from them, then they're a pair. That's kind of the route a lot of these birds take. And then this is another one we see on the islands. Here is the little blue heron, and they often are in very close proximity. And this is where they're usually nesting in Bonita Bay. So this is Sandpiper up here. This is Hidden Harbor here, and this is Oak Knoll here. And this is the bike path that runs from Hidden Harbor to Oak Knoll that you can walk or bike on. Our bird sign is down here, and this is the South Island, and this is the middle and the north. And the birds spread out along all these islands. And we do the bird count the end of April. I've done it with, this is just the South Island. This is right across the street from our house. These are all the white ibis. There's snowies in there. You can't even see some of the tricolor and the blue. They blend in so well. But in 2019, we took Ann Paul out from Florida Audubon. She's now retired. And we're going to try to get Sally Klein or some from Corkscrew or some other folks from Audubon here to do the count again with us this year. But there were 322 nests and 13 species. In 2020, there were 517 nests, 10 species, 22 snowy egret nests, mostly on that South Island. And then last year it was 537 nests, 12 species, and again the snowy egret nests, there were about 18 on the South Island. And I want to thank Paul Gavin, who took me around in his double Kobe kayak. He pedaled and I counted. It was a lot of fun. And of course, there are alligators in the moat here. Everybody sees these alligators and asks me when they're going to remove the alligators. Well, first of all, the Bonita Bay Community Association does not remove alligators. If you have an aggressive alligator, you're supposed to do it yourself, and I hope you aren't feeding them, because that's why they become aggressive. They start to approach people if they're being fed. We say a fed gator is a dead gator, which is really sad. But these birds would not necessarily nest on these islands without these gators here. These birds know that the gators will eat raccoons trying to swim to the island, river otter, snakes. A raccoon family could decimate any one of these islands at any one time if they got there. So by having these dragons in the moat, the birds feel more protected. Same thing holds true in Estero Bay. There are a lot of mangrove islands out there. You'll see the pelicans nesting on. But remember, there are sharks in those waters too. So there are other creatures that protect those islands. But on these islands, these are protected by the gators. And I think there's probably sometimes as many as 10 alligators in this particular lake. Yeah, it's one of our larger lakes though too. So they build a nest that's flat, shallow, with in the shrubs. They like to kind of go back deep into the foliage, so they're kind of hard to see. They like to kind of be up against the stalk of the tree or the deep part of the tree. That's also where they tend to roost at night, so sometimes they're very hard to see at night. And they lay 2 to 6 eggs, and then they take turn incubating these eggs for about 24 days. And then you get these cute little white chicks that hatch out. And here's a wonderful photo that Ann Macias took on the bird islands there. Here's some more. You can tell their beak is kind of blackish. And we'll have some more baby pictures here. As they, once they lay the eggs and they start having the babies, their hormones change again. And then the color starts to fade right away. So you can see the color on the bill here, or on the lures here, is actually already starting to lose its brightness. And here's a baby. Here's a good example. Here's the black beak of the baby snowy. But sometimes you mix them up with these little blue heron chicks, because the little blue heron chicks are born white, or hatched out white, I should say. And it takes them 2 years to turn blue. The first year they start to molt and they look like they've got polka dots all over. They call them calico. And then the second year they turn all blue. And these birds, believe it or not, will hybridize even. There are cases known where these two birds can mate with each other, have mated. You get a hybrid. We've also seen, and Lorraine and I'll show you a video here in a second, we saw 2 chicks like this on the pathway. I'll show you the area where next to our bird sign there, over between Oak Knoll and Hidden Harbor, and there was a little blue heron feeding a chick, and it looked like a snowy egret chick. So and there's also what they call the nest can be parasiticide or parasites. In other words, a snowy egret or a tricolor or a little blue might lay their egg in another bird's nest. And night herons even are known for laying an egg in somebody else's nest, and the parents will raise them. I mean, it's pretty remarkable. So we're not sure. I'll show you this next picture. This is this area. So if you go on that path between Hidden Harbor and Oak Knoll, this was an amazing area, because not only were the birds nesting on the islands, but they're nesting right along the shore. And I took this video last year. You're going to watch a tricolor feeding. You're going to see the little blues. And then over on the left, you'll see the little snowies. This is a little snowies right here, watching all this action. But sometimes when these birds start branching, the adults will do that too. They'll go to further out to try to get the baby to come to them as a way of getting them to try to exercise their wings too, which is really kind of interesting. So here's some more aggressive feeding behavior. And then they start to really branch out and get their wings, and probably in about 30 days they can actually fly a little bit. They stay in the nest about 20 days, and they stay around the nest for, maybe 20 days, and then they start branching, and then they start flying. The other thing that's interesting is, like, a lot of these herons is the eggs are laid sequentially. Unlike ducks, that they lay the eggs, and then once the eggs are kind of in suspended animation, and then when the female sits on the nest, all the eggs start incubating at one time. These herons, however, including the great blue heron, they lay the eggs and start incubating right away. So it may be a day and a half, 2 days for the second one, another day and a half, 2 days for the third one. So you'll often see in tricolor, little blue, great, you'll see 3 different sizes. And of course, the oldest one is usually the strongest one and tends to compete for the food more aggressively. And of course, the biggest risk to the mortality is starvation. And usually it's the younger ones that end up, if there's not enough food. And that goes back to the whole issue of the shallow wetlands. They will fly out 3 kilometers to feed, but that's a long way to go. And of course, the parents take turns initially. Then sometimes they'll both go, but it's a lot of food to try to bring back to a nest. So the more shallow wetlands we have, the more likely we're going to have better success rates on these bird islands that we have. And this was their territory. I think this is your slide again, though. See?
I recognize.
Yeah.
I do recognize this slide, so that's good. Okay, let's see if I can avoid too much moving it around. So, for those of you that don't know, this is where we are. And if you notice, it's all along this eastern seaboard in the warmer areas, and then all the way around through Texas and down into Mexico. And that's where they are year-round. And they do move around for, particularly the yellow. I mean, they'll find them up there. Notice that our home state of Minnesota, I'm not aware of one ever being found up there. They're not that dumb. But, we're going to focus on this area for a while. For those of you that are aware of Louisiana, they're losing something like a foot every year to erosion along the shorelines, and that is prime habitat for the snowy as well as the other egrets. Let's see if I can. This actually, we stole this picture from Corkscrew. That's where we volunteer, isn't it? Yeah. This is one of the signs that's up on the boardwalk. But the reason that Audubon, and that's Audubon National in New York City, not Audubon, the community down the road, or not Audubon, the community, the organizer that sells their certification to the club. This is Audubon, the organization that asks you for money. And they were formed to protect the birds, and they still do. That's still their primary mission. And what happened was that for whatever reason, the plumes that these birds exhibit became fashion items, and they turned them into hats. Whoops, I give up. They turn them into hats, and this could have been a picture of my great-grandmother, who was you call it a millinery? Milner. She sold hats in the middle of nowhere, Minnesota, Sorry, Mary, in Brainerd. And so the style even got up there. But these things were being sold all around the world, and it was the style in the late 1800s. And so what happened? Hunters went out and found the birds during breeding season, just before and just after they laid the eggs, and they would climb up into these trees. The hunters would, and shoot them or grab them and leave the chicks behind. So of course the chicks starved, and the egrets, the snowy in particular, died. And so not only did it kill that egret, but it also killed the next generation. And of course, you know, the humans are the biggest predator in the world that the world has ever seen. And this is just another example of killing animals off for their own benefit, for our own benefit. In any event, so this talks about some of the actions that were taken then, but I want to move forward to talk about what happened here. The United States finally, through Audubon and other interested parties, one of which I'm going to mention in a bit, but they pressured the federal government to protect the birds. And so the Lacey Act, and Lacey, incidentally, for all of you that know, that Iowa is the most conservative state, and politically conservative state in the nation, next to Illinois, I think. But this conservative state, actually, Lacey was a congressman there that pushed through this bill to protect the animals, and it got done. And that Lacey Act and the Migratory Bird Treaty Act are still in force. And although there have been many efforts to shut it down, it does outlaw, killing them and without a permit. And so it has had a dramatic effect on preserving the species. And then, of course, this is a segue into one of the best hot sauces there is. And the question, of course, is, what does that have to do with the snowy egret? And notice that it talks about the McElhaney Company, and it talks about Avery Island, Louisiana. And Avery Island, Louisiana, was settled by local residents named Avery in 1815 or something like that, 1820. And it's a salt dome. Avery Island is a salt dome, and what happens is salt, which is left over from prehistoric times, and then sediment builds up on top of it, and then there's a fissure, and the salt is liquefied by the pressure, and it pushes it up, and forms what's called a salt dome, and that in this case is an island in the swamp called Avery. It's one of 5 that are there, but the rest of the area, we have the oil wells that are in that part of the Gulf. So that whole area is full of these salt areas. And notice that it's very common that oil accumulates around the edges of the salt dome. But what really happens is that, at least on Avery Island, it puts salt up there. Same thing happened in Detroit, by the way, and there are other areas in the United States where salt domes formed. But this was one of the things, and to make to try to shorten this a little bit, Avery figured out that that salt he could harvest, And he did it by building a mine, getting workers, and harvesting the salt. And he set up a whole business doing that, and he made a fortune. And then the Civil War came along, and the soldiers, the Confederate soldiers, took over the mine, and they were mining it for their uses. You know, salt in those days was crucial to survival and for preserving food and so on. So Avery's salt mine was taken over, and then, of course, halfway through the Civil War, the Federals came in and destroyed the entire salt mine operation, including all the equipment, just as they did the railroads and so on to try to shorten the war. Avery and his family, his daughter married a guy named McElhaney, and there they were, the end of the Civil War, just like everybody else in the South. They were devastated, and so he was looking around. He couldn't make any money in the short term on salt, but they did have on Avery Island. They grew peppers, red peppers, and they were making their own sauce for themselves. And a shipment came into New Orleans at the early part of the war for perfume bottles, and and you may ask, what the heck does this have to do with anything? but I just got kicked to keep moving. What it has to do with is that's how the Tabasco sauce, he didn't know what the heck to do with all of the sauce he could make. So, and this was Ned McElhaney, the son-in-law of Avery. And so his quick way out to make some money and reestablish his well-being was to buy up all those perfume bottles in New Orleans and ship them over and start filling them with Tabasco sauce, what he called Tabasco sauce. And so they made a fortune. He made a fortune doing it. And, of course, you know, Tabasco is even in my refrigerator. And it's all over the world. Avery Island, where is it? Over here, if you can see that. This is the Gulf, of course, and this is Louisiana. And Avery Island is right in there. And also notice there's this island, which is called Marsh Island. And anyway, so McElhaney came back from a world tour. Now, this is the kid, Ned, and now he's a rich kid, and he's been all over the world. And he loved his Avery Island, and he came back for it. He eventually took over the Tabasco sauce company for 6 or 7 years. But what he also did is he noticed that the bird population was devastated. He had been gone enough to realize that there were no longer any snowy egrets around. So he, on his own, by himself, went out, walked through some swamps in Florida, and grabbed 4 males and 4 females of the snowies, the chicks. Yeah, he got the chicks, took them out of the nest, saved them from the hunters, the plume hunters, took them home, developed some fake islands on Avery Island, and put some nests out there and some protective caging and so on, and raised the chicks. And at the end of the rearing season, he let them go. They were adults. They were well fed. He let them go, and that was maybe going to be it. That would be the end of it. But the next year, they came back, and the rest is history. They have 20,000 of them on the island right now. You get it? Okay, well, wait, one more thing. One more thing. Marsh Island. What they did is they protected Ned Avery protected his area, protected the birds, donated the land, and then with his now new buddy, Teddy Roosevelt, who actually, for all his faults, he did want to preserve a lot of the natural wonders. And Teddy Roosevelt and McElhaney, talked to the woman that owned Marsh Island, and her husband had died some years ago, and she was trying to live on the island. And she donated what now amounts to about 200,000 acres of land. And Marsh Island is uninhabited, and it's a great bird rookery. And I'm going to get out of here.
Tomato sauce. Well, I think it's a great story about what one individual can do, even with the legislation. The only way they were going to repopulate the birds in Florida was for a guy like Ned McElhaney to bring birds back here. So he was actually responsible for reestablishing the Florida population of snowy egrets. It's really a remarkable story. And today, obviously, shallow wetlands are the issue. At one time, there were 127 million acres of wetlands in the United States. Now we have 27 million. We lost 100 million acres of wetlands. So these are very precious areas for maintaining the bird populations. Even down here at one time, there were 2 million wading birds. We may have 200,000 now. So you can understand the change that's occurred over time as these feeding areas have disappeared. And that's why it's really great that Bonita Bay is trying to restore some of these wetlands, because it does help these populations survive, and it definitely helps the birds to stay on the bird islands here and rear their young. This is another graphic we stole from Corkscrew. But this is what pre-development, the pink, the color is the pre-development wetland area, and this is what it looked like in 2004. So you can see why today trying to drain a wetland is a problem. And even down here in what's called the Picayune Strand, this was sort of ground zero for drain the swamp and turn it into homes. In fact, they used to take people up in airplanes and helicopters, and you'd drop your flour sack on the land you were buying. Ultimately, the state of Florida brought it back, and there's a huge project underway. And they put canals in, drained all that water out to the ocean. And there's a huge project underway in that area to restore those shallow wetlands out there. So there are efforts around, and of course, you know, we're in what's called the Western Everglades. So all of our water flow is really coming from this. All of our water is from the water that's flowing from areas like Lake Trafford and Corkscrew Swamp, this direction. And that's where all the water gets filtered before it flows out into the Gulf of Mexico. In fact, the Imperial River here, when the sailors would dock out here in Estero Bay, they would go up the Imperial River, up to Corkscrew to get fresh water. This area was known as freshwater area. And these shallow wetlands are not only important for the birds, but that water soaks into the ground and refills our freshwater aquifer. And that's where all of our water, drinking water, comes from, is out of those freshwater aquifers. So not only are the shallow wetlands important for the birds, but they're important for people too, because without the shallow wetlands, the saltwater incursion would occur and we would have no fresh water in those aquifers. So next time you see a bird, a wading bird, check to see if it's a snowy egret. Now you know what it looks like, and they're really a cute little bird, and it's the only bird we know of that has these golden slippers. And So what did we learn today? We learned that the snowy egrets were almost hunted to extinction for their breeding feathers. Remember, these feathers were worth more than an ounce of gold. An ounce of gold was $32, and an ounce of feathers was 2 times the value of an ounce of gold. So you can see why people were out there trying to make some money off of this. They did recover due to the federal laws and the help of individuals. Biggest threat today is the shallow wetlands and also the toxic algae blooms. You know, you do see fish that die, and sometimes those fish get eaten by birds that then die. You know, it's all part of the cycle. Not many birds make it to adulthood, really. It's probably 25% of these birds that hatch off these islands will actually make it to adulthood. The oldest snowy egret, we saw 2 different stats on this. One was a banded bird found in Utah that was 22 years old, and another one here in Florida was 17 years old. So if they do survive, they can live a long time, but it would be nice if more of them survived. So we can help by supporting clean water efforts and also by supporting wetland restoration efforts. These are the 2 big things that help us and help the birds. In addition to these programs that we put together, these are some of the bird signs that you'll see around Bonita Bay. This one is on that path between Oak Knoll and Hidden Harbor. It was just to the left of this bird sign where that video was with all the birds. If you go there in March and April, you will be amazed. Sometimes I stand up on the picnic table there to look out over it. You can really see down into those nests. And this is the sign that we made over on the Estero Bay Boardwalk at Estero Park. And this is the sign that we have at Beach Park now. We're also working on a sign that will go on the, there's a little lookout area on that bridge that goes over by the salad bowl. We're working on a sign that would be mounted on the railing there to identify all the birds in the salad bowl there. And today, if you, for those of you who've made a donation, Barb has some little gift cards for you. These are photo cards we make. This is a packet of cards. These are all photos that Ann Macias took. This is a cute photo of 3 young birds standing on that. That's the cart path down at the salad bowl, and so. These are fun. We like to make these. We just glue photos on cardstock. It's really easy. So that's all we have today. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah, Paul.
Those bird signs look expensive. Does the community association reimburse Macias once you put the sign up?
No, we usually raise money. They cost about $2,000 a piece. So we've had generous donations to the Macias Wildlife Society to put those up.
Same question with the FGCU education students.
Yeah.
What does the community association do to help pay for that?
We use Estero Park. They usually supply us with a cooler of water for the students. But otherwise, we put the programs together. We pay for the notebooks and the flash drives. We provide lunch for the students at the park. And so that's all part of what the organization does.
In the salad bowl, they're
Yeah.
building a high-rise for Osprey.
Oh, yes, there's a pole. Yes, that Hal just put a osprey. There are actually 3 osprey poles he put up in the community. That's the golf club putting those up. That one, and when Brian Butner, he has a company that puts up native bird boxes, and then he also has he puts up the osprey platforms. And that one appears to be active. They're building a nest there. There are 2 others in the community, and in addition to that, Hal's been great. He has put 12 nesting boxes on each golf course. So there are 36 nesting boxes out there. Each golf course has 4 screech owl nesting boxes, 4 flycatcher or red-bellied woodpecker, they use the same one, and then 4 eastern bluebird houses. And the screech owl, these just went up last March. The screech owl boxes were extremely successful. I think at least half the boxes had screech owls in them. The flycatchers and the red-bellied like their boxes. The bluebirds have never really nested here, but they nest in the surrounding area. So we're hopeful that once they find these, they will come back and repopulate those. So this year will be interesting. They were put up kind of late in their nesting season last year. And then Hal's also talking about now putting up additional screech owl boxes because those were so successful this year. Hal Akins is head of grounds maintenance for the club. And we have a neighbor who put up a screech owl box in her yard, and she has a screech owl in that box too. And what's really interesting is I help identify locations on Marsh to put these nesting boxes. And it's partly because I cane toad hunt out there. And on Marsh 8 and 9, we'd see screech owls at night when we were out hunting. They would be flying around. And so I said, let's put one here. That was the first screech owl box to be occupied because we knew there was a screech owl in that area. And that's another thing. We don't know how dangerous these cane toads are to the bird populations. The toxin is extremely bad. I've often worried. We have 2 eagle nests now in Bonita Bay. One on Creekside 5. And one at Spring Creek Park. And so far, they haven't, both nests were successful last year, both fledged to eaglets. But when the babies are young, the adults tend to bring them things that are easy to eat, like frogs and toads. So my team was hunting Creekside 5 and 6 pretty aggressively because we wanted to make sure that the adults were not picking up any toads or even dead toads, because a dead toad can still be toxic. So the fact that the volunteers here removed 20,000 cane toads last year and probably 10,000 this year, and our group of tadpolers removed 8.5 million tadpoles. We're making a dent, I think, in the population. We won't ever, eradicate them, but we're definitely trying to contain them. Yes.
The other thing, the other day I saw a huge iguana.
Oh, yeah.
Are they bad for the bird population?
Yes, they will eat eggs, and the BBCA does. Oh, yeah. Sorry, I'll repeat the question. Are the green iguanas bad for the bird population? Well, they are all green, but the males turn kind of that orange color. So that's usually a big old male when you see an orange one. They're all green iguanas, but they do eat bird eggs. And the grounds crew does have, they come out with a pellet gun and shoot them. And I've talked to the grounds crew, the BBC grounds crew, because they had to get vests just like our cane toad patrol vests that said iguana patrol, because when people would see them with their guns they were calling the Lee County Sheriff and getting the grounds crew guy in trouble. So they do try to control the iguana population here too. So if you see an iguana or you see cane toads or tadpoles, you can report them to grounds maintenance, all one word, at bbcahome.com. And the grounds crew, the BBCA grounds crew will come out and take out the iguanas, and then our cane toad hunters or southern trappers who currently hunts the neighborhoods will take care of the cane toad. Yeah.
I know you've worked in the past with the grounds crew to keep the foliage from on the south end
Oh,
of the
yeah.
lake
Mm-hmm.
from growing in so that predators can cross, iguanas
Right.
and raccoons. Are they still working trying to keep
Yeah,
that in
this last summer, there was a big tree that had fallen in and was almost a complete bridge over to the South Island. And they did remove that tree. There were some other trees in that outflow area to the weir there that they did not remove. And the only reason they didn't remove them is because there were some birds actually trying to nest on those branches. We're hopeful that they will try to remove those too this summer. They usually try to do it in the summer so it doesn't bother people, you know, and also it's you're out of the nesting season then too. So, yes.
The wood stork, would they nest here? Because I mean, I've seen quite a few this year.
Yeah. The wood storks. Oh yeah, do the wood storks nest in Bonita Bay? Not that I know of. They tend to like cypress trees, the tops of cypress trees. They nest very, very high up in the canopy, but they're very picky nesters. They are a tactile feeder, so they sweep their beak through the water and they bump into their food, and the water has to be just right or they won't nest. So if it's too deep, they know they can't get enough food. If it's too shallow, they can't get enough food. And they need about 40 pounds of fish in the nesting season to feed 2 chicks on the nest. So they are definitely one of the indicator species of the health of wetlands. And same with roseate spoonbills. They're a tactile feeder. You know, they're always sweeping their. Yeah. Yeah. They're more likely, the roseate spoonbills are more likely to nest on the islands in Estero Bay than inland this far. Now, one year we did have, which was amazing, and that's how Ann Paul got involved, on the bird islands here on the North Island, reddish egrets were nesting there. Now, there are only 2,000 pairs of reddish egrets in the world, and they're only along the Gulf Coast here. And when you see them, they are spectacular. They do one of the best water dancing around. You can tell and they're usually solitary, and they like to hang out. If you ever go up to Bonita Beach, beach access number 10, the very north end of a Little Hickory Island, before you go over the Big Hickory Pass, there's a big mud flat there. If you walk past that Bonita Beach Club area, past the tennis courts, I see a reddish egret there almost every time I go there, and they are just amazing. But they usually nest along the shore. And I think it was in 2016, they nested on the North Island there, and Ann Paul had put a call out to everybody in Florida asking people to report any reddish egret nesting. And Ann Macias saw them, reported them, and that's when Ann Paul started coming down to look at our bird islands, because it's a very rare thing to have a reddish egret. We've never had them before or since that one year that I know of. And oh, by the way, these islands too are man-made. There's only one natural lake in Bonita Bay. There are 80 lakes roughly, and the only natural lake, as you go over that bridge where the salad bowl is, the lake, the big round lake on the other side there, that's the only natural lake. All the other lakes are stormwater lakes, including the Bird Island lakes. And the Bird Islands were created when they were building the neighborhood around those islands, and they put a few trees on those islands, and then that started collecting other vegetation like the mangroves and the buttonwoods and the knickerbean and the leather fern and all those plants that are out there. And they've become just a magnificent rookery, for a bird rookery.
Final question.
Yes, another question.
The golden, the night heron with a golden crown.
Yeah, the yellow crown night heron, yeah.
There used to be a pair that would come out on the lake right in front of Horizons and Vistas.
Oh, uh-huh.
But I haven't seen them in the last couple of years. Have they just left this area?
You see them, I see them sometimes when I go out on our Estero Park boardwalk. If you look along the shoreline, they are feeding along there. They like crustaceans. They like to eat little crabs. They eat crayfish in the freshwater area. That's their preferred diet. But we do have, on these bird islands, we have a lot of black crown night herons too. So, but the yellow crown are more of a estuary bird, and they will probably nest. That's why you're probably seeing them in the mangroves over there closer to the estuary. As far as I know, they don't nest on these bird islands. Only the black crown night heron nests on the bird islands. And they're usually up. They put some sable palms up on those islands, and those black crown night herons seem to like those tall sable palms there to nest in. We did a whole program on, I don't have it up, we did a whole program on both the yellow crown and the black crown night heron. And actually that was one of the most rewarding ones, because one of the student teachers, she played softball at FGCU. And one night they were out in the field, and there was a yellow-crowned night heron sitting there, and she was the only one that knew what it was. We are making progress. So, any other questions? All right, well, thanks, everybody, and thanks.